grand assembly hall of the Kaldrathi Empire stretched before me like the mouth of some impossible beast. All chrome surfaces and hovering light spheres that cast shadows in directions that shouldn't exist. I hated this place. Too much posturing, too much chest beating, and not nearly enough common sense for a room supposedly filled with the galaxy's finest military minds. My name is Vexthar, and I've been covering interstellar conflicts for the Galactic News Network for the better part of 2 centuries. I've seen empires rise and fall, watched civilizations tear themselves apart over resources that became obsolete 3 cycles later, and interviewed enough self-important generals to fill a medium-sized moon. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for the absolute circus that was about to unfold. General Korthax stood at the center podium, all 7 feet of him, his azure scales catching the light like he was some kind of warrior poet instead of the bureaucratic windbag we all knew him to be. He'd gathered representatives from 47 species to witness what he called a demonstration of superior combat methodology. What it actually was. An ego trip with military funding. Honored delegates, Korthax began, his voice booming through the translation matrices that hung in the air like invisible spiderwebs. For 3 standard years, I have trained the finest warrior our generation has produced. Zara'kh of the Burning Moons has mastered 17 forms of combat, can calculate trajectory algorithms in her head faster than most ship computers, and has never, not once, been bested in single combat. Oh, here we go. I'd heard this speech before, different names, same inflated sense of superiority. I glanced around the room. The Thraxian ambassador was already asleep, his breathing apparatus making a sound like a broken air recycler. The Prelian contingent looked mildly interested, but then again, they always looked mildly interested. It was apparently a species trait. Zara'kh stepped forward, and I had to admit, she was impressive. 8 feet of pure muscle, 4 arms that moved with liquid precision, and eyes that tracked movement with predatory focus. Her exoskeleton had been polished to a mirror shine, and the ceremonial blades strapped to her back probably cost more than my annual salary. Is there anyone, Korthax continued, spreading his arms wide in a gesture that screamed false humility, anyone at all among you who believes their champion could defeat my student? Anyone who dares to test their mettle against perfection itself? The silence that followed was thicker than neutronium. Nobody wanted to volunteer their people to get publicly humiliated. The Thraxian ambassador snorted in his sleep. Someone's communicator beeped, and they scrambled to silence it like they'd just committed a war crime. Then I noticed something strange. Way in the back, where the human delegation sat, a hand went up. Not dramatically, not with any flourish. Just a simple raising of the hand, like a student asking to use the bathroom. The human delegation. Right. They'd been admitted to the Galactic Council just 15 cycles ago, still basically infants on the cosmic stage. Most species didn't take them seriously. Too emotional, too chaotic, too, well, human. They fought wars over concepts instead of resources, created art about their own mortality, and had the bizarre tendency to adopt incompatible species as pets. Weird didn't even begin to cover it. Korthax squinted toward the back. I'm sorry, did someone volunteer? The crowd parted slightly, and I got my first good look at the human who'd raised her hand. She was small. Not just human small, but actually small for a human. Maybe 5.5 feet tall, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that held absolutely zero fear. She wore what looked like a standard military uniform, nothing fancy, no decorative nonsense. Yes, General, she said, her voice carrying clearly despite the distance. I'll accept your challenge. The room erupted in what I can only describe as confused chittering. Various species have different ways of expressing disbelief, but somehow, they all manage to harmonize into one universal symphony of, "Are you kidding me right now?" Korthax's face did something complicated. It was the expression of someone who just realized that the universe has a sense of humor, and he was the punchline. I'm sorry, but I don't believe I caught your name. Lieutenant Maya Reeves, Terran Defense Force. She stepped forward with the kind of confidence that made you forget she was surrounded by beings who could bench press small spacecraft. And I'm here to answer your question. Lieutenant Reeves, Korthax said, and I could hear the condescension dripping from every syllable. While I appreciate your enthusiasm, I must inform you that this is a demonstration of elite combat. Your species has only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Perhaps you misunderstood the nature of this challenge. Oh, he was trying to give her an out. How generous, how spectacularly stupid. Maya smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who knows exactly what they're doing and is actively choosing chaos. I understood perfectly, General. You asked who could defeat your student. I'm saying I can. The Thraxian ambassador woke up with a snort. What did I miss? A human just volunteered for ritual humiliation, I muttered, my recording implant working overtime. This was going to be great footage. Tragic, horrifying, possibly career-ending for Lieutenant Reeves, but great footage nonetheless. Zara'kh stepped forward, her 4 eyes focusing on Maya with the intensity of a targeting laser. She said something in her native language, too fast for the translation matrix to catch, but I'd been around enough warriors to know condescension when I heard it. My student says, Korthax translated with barely concealed amusement, that she does not wish to accidentally kill you. She suggests perhaps a demonstration of forms instead of actual combat. Maya's smile didn't waver. Tell your student that I appreciate her concern, but I'm quite capable of taking care of myself. Shall we set terms? This was happening. This was actually happening. The human ambassador, a nervous-looking man named Thomas Fletcher, stood up like he wanted to object, then sat back down like he'd just remembered something important. Probably that humans were, against all logic and survival instinct, constitutionally incapable of backing down from a challenge. Very well, Korthax said, and now he wasn't even trying to hide his grin. Standard combat protocols, first to yield or first to incapacitation, non-lethal force preferred, but accidents do happen in the heat of battle. I assume you can sign the liability waiver? Already signed, Maya said, pulling out a datapad. Submitted it 3 days ago when I saw the event listing. I believe in being prepared. 3 days ago. She'd planned this. The little human had walked into this assembly hall with every intention of challenging the galaxy's supposed finest warrior, and she'd done her paperwork in advance. I was starting to like her, in the way you like watching a meteorite streak toward a planet. Beautiful, terrible, and absolutely inevitable. The arena manifested in the center of the hall, hard light projections creating a fighting space about 50 meters in diameter. Automated medical drones hummed to life at the edges, their sensors already scanning for potential trauma. The betting pools opened immediately. Galactic representatives might be dignified in public, but get them near a gambling opportunity, and they turned into hyperactive children. I checked the odds. 800 to 1 against the human. Someone was going to make a fortune today. Probably not Maya. The 2 fighters stepped into the arena. Zara'kh moved through a warm-up routine that looked like interpretive dance. If interpretive dance involved the systematic display of 17 different ways to snap someone's spine, her movements were flawless, each strike a perfect demonstration of form and power. Maya, by contrast, just stretched her shoulders and rolled her neck. No ceremony, no display. She looked like she was getting ready for a light jog. "Fighters ready?" Korthax called out, clearly relishing his role as master of ceremonies. "Ready?" Zara'kh rumbled, her voice like grinding stone. "Ready," Maya said, and I noticed something odd. Her heart rate, visible on the medical monitors, was steady, not elevated, not racing with adrenaline, just calm, controlled beats. "Begin." Zara'kh moved like lightning wrapped in scales, closing the distance in a heartbeat. Her first strike came in high, a blow that could shatter reinforced bone. Maya wasn't there. She'd moved, not backward but to the side. Minimal motion, maximum efficiency, the kind of movement that suggested she'd known exactly where that strike was going before it happened. The second strike came faster, a feint followed by a low sweep that should have taken Maya's legs out. Maya jumped, not high, just enough to let the leg pass underneath, and as she landed, she did something that made me blink in confusion. She patted Zara'kh on the shoulder, just a light tap, almost friendly. The arena went silent. Zara'kh froze, her combat routines clearly not including what to do when your opponent boops you like an affectionate pet. "Tag," Maya said. "You're it." Oh, this human had a death wish. A hilarious, fascinating death wish, but a death wish nonetheless. Zara'kh's eyes narrowed to slits. She launched into a combination attack that I'd seen incapacitate trained warriors in seconds. 12 strikes in 3 seconds, each one targeting vital points with surgical precision. Maya dodged them all, her movements economical to the point of art. She wasn't showboating, wasn't making big dramatic gestures. She was just not being where the attacks were, and somehow making it look effortless. "Your student is very fast," Maya observed, still moving, never stopping. Really excellent technique. The form is beautiful. Was she giving combat criticism during the fight? The audacity was breathtaking. Korthax's expression had gone from smug to concerned. Zara'kh, to her credit, adapted quickly. She changed tactics, using her 4 arms to create an overwhelming net of attacks that should have been impossible to evade in the limited space of the arena. Maya ducked under one arm, slipped past another, and somehow ended up exactly where she needed to be, which was, apparently, right in Zara'kh's guard. Before anyone could process what was happening, Maya had tapped Zara'kh on the chest plate, right over where a human's heart would be. 2, Maya counted. The crowd was making noise again, but it wasn't mockery anymore. It was confusion, with a healthy dose of disbelief. I zoomed in on Maya's face. She wasn't even breathing hard. Zara'kh roared, all pretense of formal combat dissolving into pure aggression. She grabbed for Maya with all 4 arms, a move designed to crush and immobilize. Maya dropped low, rolled, and came up behind her. Another tap, this time on the back of the neck. 3. Also, you're dropping your left guard when you commit to a grab. Just something to think about. Coaching. She was coaching Korthax's prize student, while systematically demonstrating that she could strike at will. The human had weaponized helpful advice. Zara'kh spun, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes that I'd never expected to see. Frustration. Maybe even a hint of fear. She activated her energy shields, a shimmer of force that would make physical contact nearly impossible. Smart move. Unfortunately for her, Maya apparently didn't need to touch her. Maya stopped moving, just stood there, 3 meters away, hands relaxed at her sides. "General Korthax?" she called out, not taking her eyes off Zara'kh. "Your student is very skilled, but I think we've made our point. Would you like me to continue?" The absolute gall of this tiny human, asking permission to keep demonstrating her superiority. Korthax's scales had gone a shade paler, which I didn't even know was possible for his species. "What point?" he said slowly. "Do you believe you've made? That combat effectiveness isn't just about physical superiority or perfect form," Maya replied. She still hadn't moved, hadn't attacked, but somehow she controlled the entire arena. It's about adaptation, prediction, and understanding that there's always someone who's trained differently than you have. Your student is exceptional. She's probably the finest warrior in traditional Kaldrathi combat methodology. But you asked who could defeat her, and the answer is, someone who doesn't fight the way she expects. Zara'kh, to her credit, lowered her shields. She studied Maya for a long moment, then did something that shocked everyone in the hall. She bowed, a deep gesture of respect in Kaldrathi culture. "I yield," she said clearly. "I cannot strike what I cannot predict." The arena went absolutely insane. 47 species erupted in their respective versions of shock, awe, and in several cases, financial distress as the 800-to-1 odds paid out to exactly 3 beings who'd been either brave or stupid enough to bet on the human. Korthax stood frozen at the podium, his carefully constructed demonstration of superiority crumbling around him like a sandcastle at high tide. I recorded every microsecond of his expression. This was going to play on news feeds for years. Maya walked over to Zara'kh and extended her hand, a human gesture of respect. After a moment's hesitation, Zara'kh took it, and they shook. The image of the massive warrior and the tiny human, hands clasped in mutual recognition, would become one of the most iconic photographs in modern galactic history. "You fought with honor," Zara'kh said, her voice carrying a note of genuine respect. "How did you know where I would strike?" "I watched you practice," Maya said simply. "For 3 days, I watched every available recording of your training sessions, your exhibition matches, every piece of footage I could find. You're incredibly skilled, but you're also incredibly consistent. You have patterns. Everyone has patterns." She'd studied. The human hadn't walked in here with some secret weapon or advanced technology. She'd just done her homework, learned her opponent, and fought smart instead of hard. It was so obvious in retrospect that I wanted to laugh at myself for not seeing it coming. Korthax descended from the podium, his movements stiff with shock. He approached Maya with the expression of someone who'd just had their entire worldview rearranged without consent. "Lieutenant Reeves," he said, and his voice had lost all its earlier condescension. "I believe I owe you an apology." "No need," Maya said, brushing off her uniform. "You asked an honest question, and I provided an honest answer. Though if you're interested, I'd be happy to discuss training methodologies with Zara'kh. Human combat doctrine might complement Kaldrathi techniques in interesting ways. She wasn't gloating, wasn't rubbing it in, just offering genuine tactical exchange like it was the most natural thing in the universe. The woman had just humiliated one of the galaxy's most pompous generals and embarrassed his prize student in front of 47 species, and she was treating it like a friendly sparring session. I pushed through the crowd, my recorder still running. Lieutenant Reeves, Vexthar, Galactic News Network. How did you know you could win? Maya turned to me, and her smile was tired but genuine. I didn't know, but I've been hearing for 15 cycles about how humans don't belong in the Galactic community, how we're too young, too primitive, too aggressive. I figured it was time someone showed that different doesn't mean inferior. We might do things unconventionally, but that doesn't make us weak. And the studying? The preparation? That's not a human trait, she said. That's just good sense. Know your enemy, know yourself, and all that. We might have only had FTL for 15 cycles, but we've been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've gotten pretty good at figuring out how people move, how they think, how they fight. Turns out those skills translate across species barriers pretty well. The Thoraxian ambassador had fully woken up now and was demanding someone explain what happened. The Prelian contingent was engaged in what looked like either a philosophical debate or a synchronized dance routine. It was sometimes hard to tell with Prelians, and Korthax stood in the middle of it all, watching Maya with an expression that cycled through embarrassment, respect, and calculation. Ambassador Fletcher finally made his way to Maya's side. That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen, he said. I'm still not sure which. Can't it be both? Maya asked. The arena began to dissolve, the hard light projections fading back into the floor. Medical drones scanned Maya and declared her uninjured, which seemed to disappoint them. They'd probably been hoping for something more exciting than monitoring someone dodge for 10 minutes. Zara'kh was already surrounded by other warriors, all demanding to know how a human half her size had predicted her every move. I noticed something then. A group of humans in the back of the hall, military types by their bearing, all wearing slight smirks. They didn't look surprised, not even a little bit. Lieutenant, I called out before she could escape. One more question. Did your command know you were going to do this? Maya's smile turned mysterious. Let's just say that when General Korthax announced this demonstration, my commanding officer suggested it would be a shame if nobody reminded the galaxy that humanity has something to contribute. She may have also mentioned that I have Saturdays free. Sanctioned chaos. The humans had sent Maya in here knowing exactly what she'd do, and they'd given her just enough official backing to make it legitimate, while maintaining enough deniability to avoid a diplomatic incident if it went wrong. These beings were terrifying in their calculated unpredictability. And if you'd lost? I pressed. Then I'd have lost to an exceptionally skilled warrior in fair combat, Maya said. No shame in that, but I didn't come here planning to lose. She walked away then, surrounded by her fellow humans, who were clearly trying not to laugh too loudly in the assembly hall. The various delegates began to disperse, already composing reports to their homeworlds about what they'd witnessed. The betting pool administrators looked shell-shocked as they processed payouts. I filed my story with the network, making sure to include every glorious second of footage. The headline practically wrote itself. Human upstart defeats galactic champion through unconventional tactics and detailed study. It would be viewed trillions of times across hundreds of worlds. Korthax stood alone at the podium, staring at the space where his perfect demonstration had collapsed. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. He'd walked into this, thinking he'd showcase superiority, and instead had learned a valuable lesson. Assumptions are dangerous, and underestimating your opponent is a luxury no true strategist can afford. As I packed up my equipment, I overheard Zara'kh speaking with a group of younger warriors. The human fought with wisdom, she was saying. She knew she could not match my strength, so she did not try. She knew she could not match my speed, so she focused on positioning. She understood the arena, understood her limitations, and turned them into advantages. This is what we must learn. The younger warriors listened with rapt attention, which was probably not the outcome Korthax had envisioned for the day. I caught up with Maya one more time before she left the hall. Lieutenant, off the record, what was going through your head when you raised your hand? She considered the question, her expression thoughtful. Honestly, I was thinking that somebody needed to do something, and it might as well be me. The galaxy keeps treating us like we're kids who stumbled into the adult conversation. And yeah, maybe we are relatively young as spacefaring civilizations go, but that doesn't mean we can't contribute. Sometimes the new perspective is exactly what's needed, even if that new perspective comes with significant personal risk. Especially then, she said. My grandfather used to say that if you're not willing to put yourself on the line for what you believe in, then you don't really believe it. I believe humans belong here. I believe we have value, so I put myself on the line to prove it. She left then, really and truly, disappearing into the crowded corridors of the assembly hall. I stood there for a moment, processing everything I'd witnessed. In 2 centuries of covering interstellar affairs, I'd seen plenty of surprises, but this was something different. This wasn't just a combat victory. It was a statement, a declaration that the newcomers were paying attention and wouldn't be dismissed or patronized. And the galaxy, whether it wanted to or not, had received that message loud and clear. 3 days after Maya's performance in the assembly hall, I found myself in the most unexpected location possible, a human training facility on their colony world of Terra Nova. Getting permission to visit had been surprisingly easy. Apparently, the Terran Defense Force was perfectly happy to let a journalist poke around their operations, which should have been my first warning sign that something interesting was about to happen. The facility didn't look like much from the outside. Standard prefabricated structures, basic security perimeter, nothing that screamed elite military installation. But then again, humans seemed to specialize in hiding their capabilities behind ordinary facades. It was probably a survival trait from their pre-spaceflight days. Captain Elena Vasquez met me at the entrance, a woman in her 40s with the kind of steady gaze that suggested she'd seen things that would make most beings retire to quiet agricultural worlds. Mr. Vexthar, welcome. We don't get many galactic press visits. Most species assume we're too primitive to be worth studying. Recent events suggest that assumption needs updating, I replied, my translation matrix rendering my clicks and whistles into something approximating standard galactic. Your Lieutenant Reeves made quite the impression. Vasquez's smile was sharp. Maya has a talent for that. Come on, I'll show you what we're really about here. She led me through the facility, and what I saw made me recalibrate everything I thought I knew about human military doctrine. Training rooms where soldiers practiced against holographic opponents that shifted tactics mid-combat. Simulation chambers running scenarios that involved everything from zero-gravity boarding actions to negotiating with hostile diplomats while under sniper fire. One room had a group of humans sitting absolutely still, eyes closed, doing apparently nothing. Meditation training, Vasquez explained when she caught me staring. Mental discipline, emotional regulation, tactical visualization. Half of combat is physical. The other half is keeping your head clear enough to make smart decisions when everything's chaos. Most species focus primarily on physical conditioning and weapons proficiency, I observed. Most species didn't spend several thousand years fighting themselves over every piece of dirt on their homeworld. Vasquez said bluntly, we learned early that the best weapon is the one between your ears. Everything else is just tools. We passed through a corridor decorated with photographs. Humans in various uniforms, different time periods judging by the equipment variations. Some images showed them in victory poses, others in somber memorial arrangements. Vasquez paused at one particular photo showing a group of soldiers in what looked like ancient armor facing down some kind of massive war machine. Battle of Thermopylae, 2,500 years ago. 300 soldiers held off an army of hundreds of thousands for 3 days. They all died, but they proved something important. Superior numbers and equipment don't guarantee victory. Will, strategy, and understanding terrain can level impossible odds. You celebrate defeats? I asked, genuinely confused. We celebrate courage and tactical brilliance, regardless of outcome. Those soldiers bought time for their civilization to prepare, to organize, to eventually win a war they were losing. Sometimes the small victory matters more than people realize. She continued walking, and I followed, my mind churning through implications. The humans didn't just study combat. They studied the philosophy of combat, the psychology of it, the historical patterns. They'd turned warfare into an academic discipline, analyzed across millennia of their own brutal history. We entered what appeared to be a command center. Multiple screens displayed data streams, tactical maps, and what looked like surveillance footage from various locations across the galaxy. A young human male, maybe 25 standard years, sat at a central console, fingers dancing across holographic interfaces with practiced ease. Lieutenant James Park, meet Vexthar from Galactic News Network, Vasquez said. James, show our guest what you've been working on. Park nodded, pulling up a three-dimensional tactical map. After Lieutenant Reeves's match with Zara'kh, we've been getting requests from 17 different species wanting to understand human combat methodology. So I've been putting together analysis packages. The display showed Zara'kh's fight broken down into microscopic detail. Every movement tracked, every decision point highlighted. Probability clouds showing alternate choices Maya could have made at each moment. Lieutenant Reeves had approximately 247 decision points during the engagement. At each one, she chose the optimal response based on Zara'kh's established patterns. But here's the interesting part. He manipulated the display, and suddenly I was looking at dozens of other combat scenarios, all featuring different warriors from different species. We've been studying galactic combat doctrine for 15 cycles, since the moment we joined the Council. Every public exhibition, every training video, every tactical manual we could access. Want to know what we found? I did, very much. Most galactic species fight the way they always have, Park continued. They develop a doctrine, perfect it over generations, and stick with it. Which makes sense if you're the dominant power in your region and nobody challenges your methods. But it also makes you predictable. Humans, though, we've never had that luxury. Every few centuries somebody develops a new weapon or tactic that makes the old ways obsolete, so we've learned to adapt constantly. It's made us really good at pattern recognition and counter-strategy development. The display shifted again, showing combat projections. Based on our analysis, Lieutenant Reeves had approximately 78% probability of victory against Zara'kh before the match even started, assuming she executed her strategy properly, which she did. You calculated the odds? I asked, stunned. Before the fight? Of course, Vasquez said. You think we sent Maya in there blind? We knew she could win. That was the whole point. General Korthax needed someone to pop his inflated ego, and we needed to demonstrate that humanity deserves respect. 2 problems, 1 solution. The calculated audacity was breathtaking. What if your calculations were wrong? Then Maya would have fought well, lost honorably, and we'd have learned something valuable about our analytical methods, Park said with a shrug. Every outcome has utility if you're willing to learn from it. A door opened, and Maya herself walked in, looking considerably more relaxed than the last time I'd seen her. She wore casual clothing instead of her uniform, and was carrying what appeared to be a container of some kind of beverage. Captain, the data from the Prelian martial arts exhibition just came through. I think I found the weakness in their defensive rotations. Already? Maya, you just got back from the assembly hall 3 days ago. Take a break. Breaks are for people who aren't having fun, Maya replied, then noticed me. Oh, hello, Mr. Vexthar. Enjoying your tour? It's been illuminating, I said carefully. I'm beginning to understand that your victory was considerably more calculated than it appeared. Everything we do is calculated, Maya said, settling into a chair and taking a sip of her drink. Doesn't mean it's not also genuine. I really did want to prove humanity belongs in the galactic community. The fact that we ran probability models first just means we're sensible about how we prove things. An alarm chimed softly, and everyone's attention snapped to the main display. A communication request, marked urgent, from the Kaldrathi military command. Vasquez accepted it, and General Korthax's face materialized in holographic projection. He looked different than he had at the assembly hall. Less pompous, more thoughtful, also significantly more tired. Captain Vasquez, I'm told you're the commanding officer of Lieutenant Reeves. I am, General. What can we do for you? Korthax was silent for a moment, clearly, wrestling with something internal. I have spent the last 3 days reviewing the engagement between my student and your officer. I have also reviewed the tactical analyses your people have been distributing. It has become apparent that the Kaldrathi Empire has made a significant strategic error. What error would that be? Vasquez asked, her tone carefully neutral. We assumed that because humanity was young in the galactic community, you were therefore inexperienced in warfare. We failed to investigate your actual history, your actual capabilities. This was foolish. He paused, then continued with visible effort. I would like to request a formal training exchange. Kaldrathi warriors would benefit from exposure to human tactical flexibility, and I believe humans could benefit from Kaldrathi strength and endurance conditioning. It would be mutually advantageous. The room went very quiet. This was huge. The Kaldrathi Empire was one of the most influential military powers in the known galaxy. A formal training exchange would legitimize human military doctrine in ways that a dozen assembly hall demonstrations couldn't achieve. Vasquez glanced at Maya, who gave a slight nod. General Korthax, the Terran Defense Force, would be honored to participate in such an exchange. I believe we have much to learn from each other. Excellent. I will have my staff coordinate details with yours. Korthax looked directly at Maya. Lieutenant Reeves, Zara'kh has specifically requested that you be included in the exchange program. She wishes to understand how you predicted her movements so accurately. Maya smiled. I'd be happy to work with her, General. She's an exceptional warrior. I think we could develop some interesting combined techniques. After Korthax disconnected, the room erupted in controlled celebration. Park was already pulling up logistics data, planning transportation and scheduling. Other officers I hadn't noticed began discussing curriculum possibilities. These humans could pivot from tactical analysis to diplomatic coordination in seconds, treating both as equally important aspects of their operation. This is what you wanted all along, isn't it? I asked Vasquez. The challenge, the demonstration, all of it was designed to lead here. Not specifically here, she admitted. But we knew that if Maya won, it would force other species to take us seriously. Once they started paying attention, we could begin real exchanges, real partnerships. The galaxy has incredible resources, knowledge, and experience. We'd be fools not to learn from it. But we also have things to offer, insights from our particular history. The exchange has to go both ways, or it's just another form of colonization. I thought about that. Most species either tried to dominate newcomers or ignored them entirely. The humans were doing neither. They were demanding recognition while offering genuine collaboration, standing up for themselves while staying open to learning. It was a delicate balance, and they seemed to be walking it with remarkable skill. Can I ask you something? I said to Maya. When you raised your hand in that assembly hall, what did you think would happen? She leaned back, considering. Honestly, I thought I'd either win and make a point, or lose and prove we're willing to try anyway. Either way, it was better than sitting in the back pretending we didn't have opinions. My grandmother fled a war on Earth, walked 300 miles to safety with her children on her back. She used to tell me that silence is only golden if you've got nothing worth saying. We've got plenty worth saying. An alert chimed again, this time showing incoming requests from 6 other species, all asking about human training methodologies or requesting their own exchange programs. Park looked slightly panicked as he tried to organize responses. Captain, we're going to need more staff, and possibly more facilities, and definitely more hours in the day. Welcome to success, Lieutenant, Vasquez said dryly. Everyone wants what you have until they realize it comes with actual work. She turned to me. Mr. Vexthar, you're welcome to document this. In fact, I encourage it. The more the galaxy understands about humanity, the fewer misunderstandings we'll have down the line. We're not interested in being mysterious or feared. We just want to be recognized as capable partners. Over the next several hours, I watched the humans coordinate their response to sudden galactic interest. They were efficient, organized, and surprisingly diplomatic, given their reputation for directness. They turned down requests from 3 species whose governments had histories of exploiting exchange programs, did so politely but firmly, and offered alternative arrangements that protected their interests while maintaining relationships. It was sophisticated statecraft dressed up as military administration, and I had to admire the execution. Evening fell on Terra Nova, the planet's twin moons rising over the training facility. Maya walked me to the departure area where my shuttle waited. The colony world was quieter than most military installations I'd visited, with humans moving purposefully but without the rigid formality common in other species' armed forces. Before you go, Maya said, I want to make sure you understand something. What happened at the assembly hall wasn't about proving humans are better than other species. It was about proving we're not worse. There's a difference. I'm not sure everyone will see that distinction, I replied. Then help them see it, she said simply. You're a journalist. Tell the story accurately. We didn't humiliate Zara'kh. We challenged her to grow, and she accepted that challenge with honor. Korthax wasn't destroyed by what happened. He was given an opportunity to expand his perspective, and he took it. That's the real story. Not human superiority, but human insistence on being. included in the conversation. I activated my shuttle, the engines humming to life. For what it's worth, Lieutenant, I think you've succeeded. The galaxy is definitely having a conversation about humanity now. Good, she said. That's step 1. Step 2 is making sure it's a conversation and not a lecture. We're still learning that part. The shuttle lifted off, and I watched the facility shrink below me. Terra Nova wasn't the largest human colony, wasn't their most developed world, but it represented something important. It was proof that they were spreading, growing, establishing themselves as permanent fixtures in galactic civilization. My communicator chimed with an incoming message from my editor. The footage from the assembly hall had broken viewership records. 40 billion beings across 200 worlds had watched Maya's challenge, and the analysis pieces were spawning countless debates about combat doctrine, cultural exchange, and the role of newer species in established power structures. I'd been covering galactic affairs for 2 centuries, and I'd never seen a single event generate this much discussion. Usually, people watched, nodded, and moved on with their lives. But something about Maya's challenge had resonated. Maybe it was the audacity, maybe it was the skill, maybe it was just the satisfying narrative of an underdog exceeding expectations. Or maybe, I thought as Terra Nova disappeared behind me, it was because everyone recognized a little bit of themselves in that moment. Every species had been the newcomer once. Every civilization had faced skepticism, had needed to prove themselves, had struggled for recognition. The humans were just doing it more publicly, more boldly, and with better preparation than most. Back on the Galactic News Network station, I edited my full report. Not just the fight footage, but the context, the training facilities, the analytical approach, the careful diplomacy hidden behind apparent recklessness. The galaxy needed to understand that humanity's success wasn't luck or accident. It was the result of deliberate strategy applied by people who'd spent thousands of years learning how to survive in a hostile universe. The report went live across every major information network. Within hours, the responses started pouring in. Some species were impressed. Others felt threatened. A few suggested that humans were dangerous precisely because they were so adaptable. But they were all talking, all engaging, and that was precisely what the humans wanted. 3 weeks later, I received an invitation to cover the first Kaldrathi human training exchange. It was taking place on a neutral world, with observers from a dozen other species watching to see how the 2 doctrines would mesh. I accepted immediately. This was history happening in real time, and I had a front row seat. The exchange facility was impressive, a joint construction combining Kaldrathi architectural principles with human practical modifications. Zara'kh and Maya stood at the center of a demonstration floor, surrounded by warriors from both species and observers from across the galaxy. "We will demonstrate combined techniques," Zara'kh announced, her voice carrying the formal cadence of official presentations, drawing on Kaldrathi strength and human adaptability to create new approaches to combat scenarios. They moved together, and it was beautiful. Zara'kh's power complemented Maya's precision. Where the Kaldrathi warrior provided overwhelming force, the human provided targeting accuracy. They'd clearly been practicing, developing a shared language of movement that transcended their physical differences. But more than the techniques themselves, what struck me was the attitude. Zara'kh wasn't grudgingly accepting human input. She was enthusiastically incorporating it, recognizing that Maya's different perspective made her own abilities more effective. And Maya wasn't trying to replace Kaldrathi methods. She was finding ways to enhance them, to add options and flexibility. It was collaboration in its purest form, and the observers were taking detailed notes. After the demonstration, I caught up with both warriors. "How does it feel to be making history?" I asked. Zara'kh's mandibles clicked in what I'd learned was amusement. "Every moment makes history, reporter. We are simply ensuring this moment makes good history rather than wasteful history." "What she said," Maya added. "Plus, this is just more fun than sitting in briefing rooms. I'd rather be learning new techniques than filing reports about theoretical tactical applications." "Your commanding officer might disagree with that priority assessment," I noted. "Captain Vasquez knows where to find me if she needs reports filed," Maya said with a grin. "Until then, I'm exactly where I should be, doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. Building bridges, learning skills, and proving that different species working together accomplish more than any single species alone." It was a nice sentiment. More importantly, they were actually living it. The Kaldrathi-human exchange would eventually expand to include 8 other species, creating the foundation for what would become the Galactic Tactical Institute 3 years later. Maya would eventually command that institution, working alongside Zara'kh and representatives from dozens of worlds. But that's getting ahead of the story. In that moment, standing in the exchange facility watching 2 warriors from completely different backgrounds create something new together, I understood what humanity was really bringing to the galaxy. Not superior technology or overwhelming force or ancient wisdom, just the stubborn insistence that everyone had something valuable to contribute, combined with the willingness to put in the work to prove it. General Korthax approached, watching the ongoing demonstrations with an expression that might have been pride. "Reporter Vexthar, I wanted to thank you for your coverage of recent events. Your analysis has been fair, which is more than I expected after my embarrassment at the Assembly Hall." "It wasn't embarrassment, General," I said. "It was education." "There's a difference," he laughed, a sound like grinding boulders. "Perhaps you've been spending too much time with humans. You're starting to sound like them, finding silver linings in defeats." "Is it a defeat if you gain more than you lose?" "A philosophical question for beings with more time than I possess," he said. "But I will say this. I am grateful the humans chose demonstration over domination. A species with their analytical capabilities and adaptability could be dangerous if they wished. Instead, they offer partnership. That speaks well of their character." He wasn't wrong. Humans had proven they could outthink established military doctrines, could predict and counter tactics that had been perfected over centuries. If they'd wanted to exploit that advantage, to use their skills for conquest rather than collaboration, the galaxy would have faced a significant threat. Instead, they'd chosen the harder path of mutual growth. As I filed my final report on the exchange program, I included a prediction. Within a generation, human tactical approaches would be standard study in military academies across the galaxy. Not because humans had conquered anyone, but because they'd convinced everyone that their methods had value worth learning. They'd won through demonstration, preparation, and the simple audacity to raise a hand when someone asked who could meet a challenge. And really, I thought as I transmitted the report, that was the most human thing possible. When faced with a universe that underestimated them, they didn't complain or withdraw. They just worked harder, proved themselves more thoroughly, and turned skeptics into students. It was frustrating, admirable, and absolutely unstoppable. The galaxy was still learning what it meant to have humanity as full members. But thanks to one lieutenant who'd raised her hand at exactly the right moment, that learning process was happening through cooperation rather than conflict. Future historians would probably mark Maya's challenge as a turning point, the moment when humanity stopped being the awkward newcomers and started being recognized as valuable contributors. Me, I was just grateful I'd been there to record it. 200 years covering galactic affairs, and I'd finally witnessed something genuinely new. Not a war, not a conquest, not the rise and fall of empires. Just one small human proving a simple point. Never underestimate someone willing to do their homework, and never assume that being different means being lesser. The galaxy had learned that lesson, and somehow, we were all better for it.